Well, welcome back to the HR blockchain. And today I'm super excited to welcome Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. And Ryan is, I'll let him tell you about himself, but for me, he's been a source of a beacon sort of light when it comes to when I go to a dark place. Let's say that, Ryan. So know that you've done that for me. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and a little bit about your recent publication, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And that's great to know. It's not necessarily that's what I was attending, but it's great to know that that maybe had some effect on you. And because it's had the ideas that I talk about have a similar effect for me. Is it's helped me in the dark places, or it's helped me become more of my ideal self. I don't know about you, but for me, I can't think back of I don't feel like my dark places have really been that dark. Like people have had it much worse than me. But so
Agreed.
much of my life I've spent in a place where I'm just less than what I had wanted to be.
Mm,
And the idea is when we start to talk about mindsets, which I'll introduce here, is we actually start to deepen our self-awareness to such a degree that we better understand why at times we're not living up to our ideal self, and how we go about making a shift more towards our ideal selves. So let me just kind of introduce how I came to the topic of focusing on mindsets. And just a little bit about my background is I did my PhD at Indiana University in organizational behavior and human resources. And I did my dissertation on leadership. And this allowed me to review the last 70 years of leadership research, which is great. And one of the things that I observed is that the majority of leadership research really focuses in on one question. And that question is, what do leaders need to do to be effective? And I think that this is a good question in the sense it's one that I think every leader has. We all want to know, what do we need to do to be effective? But it didn't sit really well with me because I feel like it is a little bit short-sighted. Because in my mind, I think that leadership is so much more than just doing the right things. It's actually about being a certain someone, being somebody that others want to follow. And so I've been on a mission for the last 7 years to try to figure out, how do we tap into the being element of leadership? And everything's led me to mindsets, which are our mental lenses that shape how we view the world. So the basic idea is that, and we could talk about this at multiple levels, but at a pretty surface level, our mindsets and how we see the world shape how we think, how we learn, and how we behave. But the thing is our mindsets are something that most people aren't conscious of in terms of what mindsets do they have.
yeah.
And but if we could become awakened to these mental lenses, then we could do something about it. So hopefully that's a decent background. In my book, as you alluded to, Success Mindsets is meant to be an introduction to people about mindsets, what they
Yeah.
are, what are the power of mindsets, and what mindsets are out there, so that I could introspect about them and what mindsets do I need to have to become more of my ideal self.
Yeah, I listened to your book that's out on audio as well. And I think that the idea was like, hey, this is step one. It felt like a foundation just of understanding. And I see that it was gonna, layer into multiple places. You went to some really cool places in what you just said that we'll touch upon as well. Um, but I think that I want to personalize this just a little bit more. So Ryan, you're living, can I call you Dr. Ryan? I just like calling you Dr. Ryan. It's fun. Where are you living now? And what part of the country are you in? I know you're up early for this, so I appreciate that. But I also see that you have a really cool looking car in your background. So I want to know just a little bit more on the personal level of what makes you tick and why you're doing what you're doing. We talk a lot about what the whys of everything, all those famous think tanks and think the thought process people and everything else. But what's behind all this? What would catalyze this effort into this work?
Yeah, great question. And I guess let me tell a story that hopefully will answer all of those questions. So
Sure.
I'm in Southern California. I'm a
Mhm.
professor at Cal State Fullerton. I teach at the business school. I do research on leadership. And then I do a lot of consulting for organizations on the side in terms of developing their leaders and their culture.
Mhm.
And I think to maybe summarize what makes me tick a little bit is one of the things that I learned quickly moving to Southern California is there's a lot of homeless people here in Southern California. In fact, I recently learned that half of the United States homeless population is in California.
Wow.
So what that means for me, and I noticed this upon moving here, that if I'm driving around, I'm going to come across a homeless person asking for something on a street corner. And usually they're there kind of waiting for cars to pull up at a stoplight. And
Mhm.
for most of my adult life, when I would see these individuals, my immediate reaction was to kind of assume that they weren't doing their best.
Mhm.
And because I would assume that, I was quick to be critical of them.
Mhm.
And it just in my, I'm sitting in my car, there's a barrier like my window between me and them. And the thoughts in my mind would be something along the lines of, and I'm not proud of this, but it would be along the lines of, why are you asking me for my hard-earned money when you're just standing here? Why don't you do something more productive? Maybe go get a job, right?
Right.
That's kind of my mentality. And then what's my likelihood of navigating that situation in a productive way?
Mhm.
Well, as I would reflect upon those moments, I would be forced to admit to myself I was being less than who I ideally wanted to be.
Mm.
And I just didn't
Wow.
know, I didn't know how to shift. And I came across a book by Brene Brown. It's called Rising Strong. And there's an anecdote
Wow.
in this book that invited me to see these individuals differently. And she invited me to assume that they are doing the best that they can.
Wow. That's so
And
great.
the effect that that's had has been huge, because when I invited myself to see them as doing the best that they could, it left me to ask the question, what in the world has happened in their life that has led them to believe that this is the best way to live? And
Mm.
immediately upon asking that question, I grow empathetic. And
Mhm.
I'm much more inclined to navigate that situation in a manner that's closer to my ideal self, which is offering support and help when I have that capability. And so
Mhm.
to me, what I'm trying to demonstrate is a shift has occurred in me at a very foundational level, and that is how I would see these individuals as
Mhm.
not doing their best versus doing their best. And based upon how I would see them, I would either act critically or think critically or think empathetically. And then I would behave very differently. And
Mhm.
so this is hopefully an example that demonstrates the power of mindsets and the effect that it can have on an individual. And in particular, myself, because it's now that I know that I need to see better. And when I see better, I think and I behave better and much more aligned with my ideal self. Now I could be happier about who I am and the impact that I'm having on the world. And so why I do this is I want to help other people make similar shifts so that they
Mhm.
could be more of who they want to be. I mean, as I say this, I think, and to put it into a workplace context, there's the stereotypical example of how does the manager react when an employee shows up to work late? Do
Yeah.
they jump all over them and be critical? Or do
Mhm.
they approach them and say, what's wrong? What
Mhm.
happened this morning?
Yeah.
Right? And it's just a very different approach that makes such a huge difference in the workplace. So hopefully that makes some of these ideas
No,
come to
yeah.
life a
I
little
mean,
bit.
what you're saying is, it's interesting is that, is that I interview a lot of different folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, but there's always some catalyst or some moment or some, uh, for you, it was I mean, I've read the same book. I have read all Brené's work. All of the thought process of just, um, that you had this moment of kind of, I don't know what you would call it, clarity as an individual. And so that's going to lead me somewhere. And I took some notes. If you see me writing, it's because I'm taking notes of some of these real brilliant tidbits you might not know that you're saying, but you are saying, is that we all had this moment just, 8 months ago where, um, we had to make a mindset shift. We weren't asked to. And, I'll parallel it to a couple of stories, that I've had. I've interviewed folks who've had massive tragedies in their life, lost both legs, amputees, still running marathons. I've interviewed folks who lead thousands of people, and how they get to that point. And the growth was thrust upon them. They had to learn on their own. So now when I talk about the human experience, and I talk about how my audience, our chief human resource officers, our chief financial officers, our our human resource community in general got slapped so hard, and everyone, and not to downplay the tragedy that happened in this country and continues to happen daily, that we're losing lives, obviously. Um, this was a mindset that was just, I don't know what choices we had at that time. I'll personally say, on my side, it was like the stages of grief almost, right? I was like, fear. I didn't have the guilt. I didn't think I brought the virus here, but I was like fearful, trying to deal with all these other things. And at first I was fearful, and then I was angry, and then I was back to fearful, then I was angry. But it led to, if I hadn't have quickly, I mean, attribute some of this to your work, been cognizant of my mindset, I would have not been able to make that quick pivot and shift to get back to where I needed to go and see the long-term goal of what you just we described kind of as our why, our thought process, and where we are. So my question circles back after that little diatribe of thinking about, when you're looking at this, one of the largest events of our lifetime that's happened, right? Uh, how do we find our mindset there and not lose it to the, I guess there's two ways. There's two people, right? There's those that never had one, or that weren't self-aware enough to know they had one, and then there's those that were in a good place, or and persevered. Maybe there's three, and then there's those that I'm not going to say there's three, because there's nobody that didn't struggle. There's nobody that didn't have the mental anguish. So I come to you, Dr. Ryan. I say, what do we do? What's our step there? How should our leaders be reacting right now?
Yeah, let me answer that in two ways. So there's one thought that occurs to me is there's a gentleman, his name is Bob Quinn. He's a professor emeritus at University of Michigan. He's one of the founders of the field of positive psychology. And he's at least one of the world's best organizational and personal change experts.
Wow.
And he says that people transform for one of two reasons.
Okay.
Either a crisis or deep learning. And one of those is something that we're in control over. The other one is something we're not in control over. And I think my guess is that you would agree with me that most people transform because of a crisis than through deep learning, but both routes are possible. And so when you're talking about this COVID pandemic, it's a crisis. And it can be a pivot point for somebody. And that could be in a positive way or in a negative way. It's going to alter our trajectory nonetheless. Which direction are we going to head because of this then becomes the question. And let me give you, to kind of come back to your question, let me give you an example that I saw in my community when this pandemic first hit. So right down the street from me, there are two pizza places on opposite sides of the intersection. And as soon as the pandemic hit, and now people couldn't go inside the pizza places to eat, one of these places effectively went dark. Like you just didn't even know if they were open, if you could even order pizza from them.
Mhm.
The other place on the other side of the intersection, they they almost got brighter. It was really interesting. Like they've always been there, but now they started to post much more in social media. Like actually not just who they were and what they could provide, but how they could be a support to the community. And one of the promotions that they ran was you could buy a make at home pizza kit to build a memory with your family. And at the time you couldn't buy toilet paper in the stores. And they said, if you buy this, we'll throw in a roll of toilet paper. And to me, this was such a cool example because what happened, and I didn't think this happened for everybody, is when the pandemic hit, we're faced with a choice. And let's compare ourselves to a turtle or a tortoise.
Okay.
And how did we react? Did we pull our head into our shells, our shells, and then self-protect? Or did we keep our neck out at a time that it felt really scary to do so? Right? So the first pizza place that effectively went dark, they just pulled into their shell. They're just, I hope we could survive this. And they didn't really do anything. It was a self-protection mode that benefited them in the short term, but it had no benefit for their customers, and it had no benefit for the community in the short term, and it wasn't going to benefit them, their customers, or the community in the long term. But in the moment, it felt right to them, right? Because they're in the self-protection mode. This other pizza place, they made a decision to do something to keep their neck out when it was scary to do so. And that probably came at a cost to them. Like my guess is that they took risks that probably put them into some financial jeopardy in the short term. And so it had a cost to them in the short term, but it was benefiting their customers and it was benefiting the community in the short term. And then if we look into the long term, because they were deepening their relationships with their customers and their community at a time of difficulty, we've got to believe that this is going to bode well for them in the future. And it's going to be better for their customers and the community in the future. So, I mean, if I had a PowerPoint slide, hopefully I could present this really visually. But what I'm trying to articulate is what one pizza place did something that benefited them in the short run, which is self-protection, but was never going to have any other benefits outside of them or for the long run.
No macro benefit to that.
Okay. Yeah. The other one, because they kept their neck out, even at a cost, is going to benefit those around them and even themselves in the long run. And so when we are faced with a crisis like we are faced with the same choice. Do we pull our head into our shells or do we keep it out? Because the only way that we are going to be like our ideal selves and to benefit the world around us is if we have our neck out. It's impossible to benefit our world with our neck hidden back into our shells. And so I think just becoming conscious of this, I hope helps people want to develop more of the intentionality to keep their heads out of their shells.
Now, let's take that a step further, right? Because we're talking about leaders. And so we have leaders, there was some thin ice that for a lot of corporations. It was not only were we hit with a pandemic, we were hit with a huge social justice movement, and how corporations reacted to that had a lot to do with how they were perceived per se, not per se, how they were perceived by their customers, the community, some in a political divide, which I want nothing to do with. But I will tell you that you said that's a powerful analogy, which you mentioned, right? Now, as a leader, I deal with a lot of different CEOs, CFOs, and board members and everywhere else. I see that, right? I see those people who are just like, I'm shelled up, I'm okay. And I'm like you, Ryan. I'll take you back to your story, your brilliant story about that you shared about how the homeless community, you know, we still need to be empathetic towards that, right? And I'm sure leaders are seeing their employees in that situation too. But as leaders, at what, so are we saying now that those leaders that are going to take the most risk, and this is okay to say this, those leaders that are going to take the most risk and perhaps leverage, um, the story you told, they leverage this almost to a positive out of a negative, which I find it is the most amazing quality I can find in people. And those the leaders that are going to come out on top of out of this? Because I feel like we're going to lose some companies out of this. I feel like we're going to lose just based on the state of, let's just say economically, no matter how much money we pump into the economy, someone's there, we see businesses closing, right? You know that. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, some of that's unavoidable, unfortunately. Not everyone can go sit in a movie theater according to some laws and all these other things in different states. I'm in Texas, we can do whatever we want. But I'm saying but I mean in different states. So how do we correlate that into the leadership, into the leadership arena for those that are in leadership, those that are in charge of other humans? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think maybe let me invite the leaders who are listening to be introspective and to be honest with themselves. And
Okay.
let me give you, Leo, I'm going to give you 4 desires, and you tell me whether or not you feel like leaders have the pressure to fulfill these desires. Okay.
Yeah.
So the 4 desires are a desire to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. What do you think? Do you feel like leaders feel the pressure to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead?
Not only do I feel that way, I know that because they have investors, venture capital firms, they have CFOs above them looking on the HR team. Absolutely, they feel that way.
All right. So leaders are feeling this pressure to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. And this is very justifiable because
It is.
who wants to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up? Right? Nobody does.
It's happened to me.
So, but when we look at this, when our focus is on looking good, being right, avoiding problems, and getting ahead, where is our focus?
Internal.
It's on ourselves, right? And Travis Bradberry's done a lot of research on emotional intelligence, and he finds that the leaders with the group of people in an organization with the lowest levels of emotional intelligence are the executive team, on average. I'm not saying that's everybody, but it's not that these leaders are bad people. It's just that the pressure is so high for them to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead, that they end up turning inward and they make decisions that help them look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. And when they make those decisions, they have a hard time seeing the impact that some of those decisions have on those that they are less focused on, that are outside of themselves. And so I think a lot of leaders get into these modes with these desires. And to kind of put the mindset spin to this, is these 4 desires are attached to 4 negative mindsets that I focus on: fixed, closed, prevention, and inward mindsets. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we're here, and I've been here. I was been in this mode for most of my adult life, and this is part of the shift. Is I think I was here partly because I didn't know that there was better desires to have. And so maybe let me introduce these more productive desires that I think is what will allow us to capitalize on the crisis, whatever crisis we may face. So instead of a desire to look good, we should have a desire to learn and grow. The thing that's really tricky about this, though, is if we want to learn and grow, we've got to look bad at times, because those are the times that we're going to learn and grow the most. The second one is, if we will, instead of wanting to be right, we should want to find truth and think optimally.
Mm.
which means at times we're going to have to admit that we've been wrong.
Think optimally in expanding on that is being able to think critically about what our own decisions were. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good.
seeking truth, right? So
Seeking
it's
truth.
at the core, we believe that we can be wrong. So
Okay.
instead of believing that we're right, I believe that I can be wrong. And so I want to make sure that I'm not wrong. I'm going to seek after new information and maybe even disconfirming information, as opposed to only information that will support my belief that I'm right.
So versus look good, we want to learn and grow, be right, we want to find truth and seek truth and think optimally. Okay, let's keep going.
And then the third one is, instead of wanting to avoid problems, we need to reach goals, which means at times we're going to have to be okay with problems, because the only way we're going to reach our goals is to wade through problems.
Oh, that's big. That's big. I'm going to give that a second that should be on a t-shirt. So, the only way we're going to reach goals is to wade through problems. Wow, that's fantastic. I'll tell you, I did a little bit of self-development, Doc, during this pandemic, or during the time we had where we weren't running around all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, I think this was a good opportunity for some, and I hope that we're providing a little bit of this opportunity still, to grow just a little bit, and not to take away from those that are suffering from any type of mental fatigue and anguish from what's happened and everything else. I'm conscious that's the elephant in the room. I say this, and I've said this in another interview, and that we're kind of done with COVID. COVID might not be done with us, and we'll see where it leads us. Right? We don't know exactly what's going to happen. No one can admit it, but I don't want to make this completely COVID centric. But I want to continue to think about these leadership areas. You had mentioned, you also had mentioned one other thing, which was get ahead, right? And get ahead to me means, if I make a decision, I don't want to be wrong. If I'm, I don't want to be the person to sit at the next board meeting, or sit with my team and say, you know what, I made a wrong choice. I need to pivot from here, and we need to get out of this choice quickly. In my limited, when I see this, I wouldn't say it's limited. When I see this, it's typically based on a lack of consensus within teams when they made the decision originally. It was originally just a headstrong driven decision. I'm going to get behind this, and you better get behind this. I had a leader the other day I was listening to, talking to, and they said, well, they're just going to have to learn how to do this. You're just going to have to get over it and learn how to do it. And I thought, interesting. Mm-hmm. So is there a pivot we can make on the instead of getting ahead, what's a better behavior that we can have?
Yeah, that's good. So that's the last one here. So instead of a desire to get ahead, we need to have a desire to lift others, which means at times that we're going to have to be okay with putting ourselves on the back burner. And so it's, as we paint this out, I mean, and all of these desires on the positive side are associated with the 4 positive mindsets that I focus on: growth, open, promotion, and outward. And what this reveals to me is that it invites me that I've got to be okay with insecurities, right? That I've got to be okay at times, not this all the time. I've got to be okay with looking bad, being wrong, having problems, and getting passed up, right? And if I could be in a place where, if those things occur and I'm okay, then I could put myself in a position where I could truly be emotionally intelligent, make decisions that don't just benefit me, but benefit everybody, that I could truly be that servant leader. And when I work with leaders, what generally trips them up, and it trips all of us up, we all have it, and it trips all of us up in our own ways, but it's our fears and our insecurities around looking bad, being wrong, missing out, or getting passed up, right? I mean, let me just give you an example. I was on a phone call yesterday with an executive team.
Mhm.
They are wanting to make their organization more agile and future ready, as all organizations right now. And
it's a thing to do, Doc. It's a thing to do.
yep. So they brought me into this phone call, and what I had been told, the CEO is the one that's championing me within the organization, but I've been told by multiple parties that the rest of the executive team is not going to be very open to your ideas of the role that mindsets play in agility and future readiness. So I was a little bit anxious going into this meeting, and the CEO did something that I felt like was brilliant, but also vulnerable, which is something that that organization has a really hard time doing.
Mhm.
So the CEO says, I think all of us in this executive team feel like we are being agile and innovative. I mean, we are investing millions of dollars on developing new technology. And so I think that we all feel like we are that way. And we recognize that if we've got 10 projects we're investing in, 7 of them aren't going to pan out. But he said, I've been telling a message to our employees, and that is, I've been telling them, we need to be innovative. We need to try new things. I recognize that things will fail. But then he adds on this caveat, but these investments need to pay off with a financial return. Right. So, and what he said that, and he did it in a very open-ended way, in the sense that it invited us and then the rest of his executive team to think, what message, when I say this, what message are our employees hearing? And you could be on one of these 10 projects, let's say, that they're investing in. And if you heard him say his message and ended it with, okay, we recognize that we're going to fail, but we need a financial return. How do you interpret that as an employee? Is my project has got to succeed. I cannot fail. I mean, that's how the employees are feeling. And so I invited him, and I intentionally tried to slow us down in the meeting because I knew that this would resonate with the rest of the group. As I invited him, I said, when you add on that caveat on the end, who is that for? Is that for them, or is that for you? And we were left to sit with that. And what came out is, that's for him. And he's not the only one sending this message. And that's why it was brilliant why he said this. Is the reason why he said it was to make him feel better, make him feel comfortable with the risk that he has chosen to take as the CEO. And I invited him to explore the idea that you don't need to put that burden on your employees. That because you made the decision, this is in a way your burden to carry. You made this decision. Don't pass that burden off on others, because what that does, it makes them feel unsafe. And this is your need to pass on this burden comes from a place of fear and insecurity. And we need to be able to sit with that. And I don't know if you get this as I'm saying this, but my perception of this experience was, this leader in this moment is going through an incredibly deep introspective dive. And I just don't know many leaders who are willing to get there and be vulnerable in the moment in front of their executive team. Like, it was just, to me, such a powerful example of leadership in that moment. And it was something that didn't make him look good. He admitted that he was wrong. He admitted that we are going to have problems. And he was willing to kind of put himself on the back burner.
He learned and grew. He found truth, and he bought into. From my notes, from what we just talked about, he also was able to reach what I would call strategic overall goals for the organization, and then lift others up in the process. So he followed all the 4 steps we just talked about from that mindset piece. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Unbelievable. I thank you for sharing that piece, because I think that's going to resonate hard. Okay, so I'm going to shift just a little bit because this is the nuts and bolts, the reality of mindset to me, because I've listened to your book. Okay, my mindset is I will give you a pure diagnosis. I have kind of a self-limiting mindset at times. I exceptionally do well at my work, whatever that is. Sometimes I do great, fantastic. There's smarter guys than me. There's better reps than me. There's better people. But at the end of the day, I end up doing well, always in, let's say, the top 10 of my, however you want to rank things. Yet, I'm human. So every morning, I don't have any ritual or process where, and I'll be a little more vulnerable, right? Where I'm not waking up and saying, okay, this is my mindset for the day, or this is my, is there a conscious moment where we make a decision that leads us to have these mindsets, or are they things that happen that we then reflect upon, that we learn from? So that's probably where in your work I am looking for the most probably clarity at the end of the day, and maybe you can help me with that.
Well, I'll try.
Not to make this all about me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel this way.
No, yeah, let me try. So I think it's helpful for us to dive deeper into our understanding of what mindsets are, because really what our mindsets are specific neural connections in our brain. That actually, we've got three major brain regions: our reptilian brain, our mammalian brain, and our human brain. And our brain as a whole is made up of millions of neural connections. Our mindsets are a very small percentage of these, and they're a very unique type of neural connection in that these neural connections are long-range neural connections that span across the three major brain regions. So the vast majority of our neural connections stay within that particular region. There's specific neural connections that integrate these three major brain regions. And so when we've all got in our minds, let's just say a prevention mindset and a promotion mindset neural connection. Now, whatever one is stronger is the one that fires more loudly and more rapidly. In other words, that's the one that comes to drive our processing. And so if we've got a prevention mindset where we're more focused on avoiding problems than we are on reaching goals, then what that means for me is I need to activate and strengthen my positive mindset neural connections. And I've got to be really intentional about doing that. So sometimes a morning practice that does activate and strengthen that positive mindset neural connection will help us carry that mindset into the day. But if we've already got that promotion mindset neural connection to begin with, or we've strengthened it to the point that we don't need to necessarily activate it every morning, it's already there, it's primed, ready to go, then we should be just fine. And so for me, just kind of give a personal example, is most of my adult life, I did have a prevention mindset. And I was given a book by a gentleman I met. He's the CEO of a company here in Orange County. And I'll hold up the book if we're going to be showing this. The book is called The 5-Minute Journal. And he hands me this.
Yeah.
All right. He hands me this and he says, this book is going to change your life. And I'm thinking, well, outwardly, oh, thank you. This is so kind. I love books. This is great. Inwardly, I'm thinking, there is no way in hell I am journaling. Like, this is not going to happen. The last thing I ever want to do is journal. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not your audience. Is kind of what I was thinking. But I bring the book home and I open it up, and sure enough, it's just like 3 questions in the morning and 2 questions at night. So
I have the book and it's completely empty. So I want to hear how you did it.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this guy says it's going to change my life. I'm going to give it 2 weeks. If it changes my life, great. If it doesn't, I'll toss it in the trash. So I started to answer these questions every morning. What are 3 things I'm grateful for? What are 3 things that would make today great? Fill in some self-affirmations. Then at the end of the day, what are 3 amazing things that happened today? And how could I have made today even better? And for me, because I started with the prevention mindset, which meant when I would wake up in the morning, I was much more concerned about making sure I was comfortable than I was about reaching my goals. So that meant I didn't want to do anything difficult. I just wanted to do what was easy. And
Wow.
and so when I started to do this actually was activating and strengthening my positive mindset or my promotion mindset neuroconnections, such that I started to think, how do I make today better than yesterday? How do I make this month better than last month? How do I make this year better than last year? And in order to do that, I may have to do difficult things. In fact, I will have to do difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I credit this for us having this conversation. Like, I would have never started my business. I would have never written my book. I would have never tried to promote myself in the ways that I have, in terms of trying to get my book out there in the world, getting on podcasts, and doing things like this. Like, it never would have happened had I not made that shift. So for me, I still do it because I've got that inclination to have that prevention mindset. To me, this is my daily activation of my promotion mindset. So if you already had a promotion mindset to begin with, you don't need a book like this to help you, right? But that was an area where I needed a significant shift. So hopefully that may be a little bit of a long-winded example, but hopefully it makes the idea come to life a little bit.
I need to start writing in that book pretty quickly. I love that. I love the idea. And I did start for a few days, and I found myself kind of reverting back into my old prevention kind of mindset, or my own comfortable mind. What you said was, you kind of went over it so fast that you did. I don't even know if you heard yourself say it, but you said, I was comfortable versus reaching goals. And so I'm just going to take that, and then we'll do a little wrap, because I know we've been going for a minute, and your time. I know you've got probably some other appointments you need to get to, but I will tell you, the idea of being comfortable right now is permeating a little bit through the corporate world. And I don't mean necessarily comfortable, because we're all a little bit uncomfortable. We're not 100% sure where revenues are coming from for Q4 and Q1. Everyone's telling us it's going to be a massive flu season. The economy is going to collapse. There's other people saying, oh, no, we'll be okay as long as the Fed doesn't raise rates. Again, this is the first time we've ever seen certain aspects of the economy. I don't want to get too detailed, but the stock market still continues to rise. So there's all these real paradoxical things going on. There's that are too binary and number driven for someone like myself. But you and I, who deal in emotions and thought processes and employees and how they feel. But there's a thematic thing that's been happening through this conversation. You had the conversation with that CEO, where you took him out of his comfort zone. You know what I mean? You got out of your comfort zone. And, I think we can all learn from that, by the way, from what you said about the homeless community. I'm in Austin, and we have a huge debate going on right now, because we have camps that exist underneath a lot of our bridges, a lot of the places where near the lakes, where there's a large homeless community. Now, could we do something to help that? Yes. Have we figured it out? No, we haven't figured it out. But there's a big debate politically, and I'm not going to get involved in it, about those homeless camping ordinance that has been allowed right now, and our mayor's getting a lot of heat for this. And so I think that was amazing that you were able to go through that piece. And I think what we ended up seeing was, you got out of all those comfort zones. So as we finish talking to leaders today, right? What they're in a non-risk, comfort. I'm going to go back to the tortoise. I'm going to go back to the idea that, hey, we're not, if we are going to make some type of move, how are we better for it? How do we get out of this better? And how would you advise the chief human resource officer of an 800 employee company to actually, walk into that boardroom and say, these are my ideas, these are my thoughts, and how would you empower that individual? So hopefully that question made sense.
Yeah. So yeah, let me answer that question, but let me add on to it as well. So I think to me, one of the powers of focusing on mindsets is it allows us to put labels on them so that we can introspect about them ourselves. So in any given moment, we can ask ourselves, am I being fixed or growth? Am I trying to look good or learn and grow? Am I close open? Am I prevention or promotion? Am I inward? So if I'm going into that business room, I could check myself. What place am I coming from? Am I coming from a self-protection mode? Or am I coming where I'm wanting to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead? Or am I coming at this from an organization advance mode, a contribution mode, where I want to
Wow.
learn and grow, find truth, reach goals, and lift others? So I think part of that, hopefully that helps answer that question, but you spurred a thought that I hope will inspire the listeners. And that is, you were talking about this idea between seeking to be comfortable and seeking goals. And I'm going to throw out a couple of words: profitability, effectiveness, efficiency, reliable, ethical, compatible, coping, right? A lot of times we see these as goals. If we're seeking after profitability, that's a goal. But I actually wonder if it is more comfort. Like if we can get to profitability, we're going to be comfortable. So let me inspire us to maybe elevate our thinking. So how about instead of profitable, we focus on being generous? Instead of effective, we focus on excellence. Instead of efficiency, we focus on being extraordinary. Instead of reliable, we focus on being flawless. Instead of ethical, we focus on being virtuous, right? So when I see this idea of profitable versus being generous, profitable can be a place of comfort. Generous is a goal. That's something that we seek to become. And I don't think profitable is this becoming thing. It's a doing thing. It's being generous, excellent, extraordinary, flawless. These are being things. And I think that that's kind of coming full circle to where my takeaway from the review of the leadership research is the primary focus has been on doing. And we need to focus more on being. Not that doing isn't important, but in my mind, the being should come first. And so hopefully this conversation helps our listeners better want to dive into their being and improve their being so they can be more of their ideal selves.
That is absolute gold. I love what you just said. It really puts a nice synopsis on everything. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the last things. I'm going to humanize for a minute. So this whole time you and I have been talking, I've been taking notes on my little pad, so that selfishly. But at the same time, I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this. But you mentioned a couple of things that made me just kind of take a little assessment, which is, is why you're so good at what you do, why people want to talk to you, why more organizations, in my opinion, should be hiring you to speak, why people should be getting your book, why people should be thinking about mindsets, because if it was up to me, Dr. Ryan, I would say, hey man, I need an app. And my app, I need to check in my mindset every morning and figure out, reminder, hey, an idea for you. Build the dang app, right?
I've got one.
Okay, I want it. I'm downloading it.
So
promote it.
Check out my digital mindset coach on my website. So if you Google my name and digital mindset coach,
we won't even have to do it. We'll post it right now.
Perfect.
We'll find it and we'll post it right in the middle of this interview. I am so glad you said that, because that's the thing, right? We all need the tools. You have the tool. You have the journal. It worked for you. Obviously, you had the discipline to put that in. So good on you for doing that. But a couple of things. You're going to notice here that I have a lot of guitars. There's one missing. That guitar missing is in my bedroom, because last night I was, attempting to do something. Who knows what I
You
was
were
doing.
rocking out is what you were doing.
I was rocking out. I was trying to write something, which that's a whole other story. We'll talk about that offline. But I was trying to write something, or continue to create. Been taking these songwriting kind of classes to, and there's a limit of self belief there, or self doubt, and all these mindsets that exist in that world that are different than the corporate structure we're talking about. But at one point during the conversation, something you said allowed me to let go of the idea that that guitar wasn't there. Because I was like, that guitar's not there. It's not going to look good on camera. I'm so worried. But I said, but something about what you, in this whole conversation, just accepting that, hey, I'm flawed in some ways and I'm not perfect in other ways. And we're going to be able to get through this no matter what, if that guitar is not there. And it's my favorite guitar in the world. And it's not there today, but it's going to be okay. And this interview is just absolute proof for our leaders that are listening, for our CHROs that are listening, for our CFOs, for anyone, in fact, who is leading a small business, anyone, that there are frameworks, there are people in our society, there are those that are willing and looking to help and looking to dive deep and get into the arena with you. You mentioned Brene Brown's work, so I'm going to have to say that, right? She said, my favorite quote from Brene Brown is, if you're not currently in the arena, fighting it out, then basically your opinion means nothing to me. So
Yep.
she said she had a little colorful word to that. But I
Uh-huh.
will say that I feel like you and I are in the same arena. We're fighting day to day to see people improve. So I want to thank you so much. This is a huge blessing for me, a blessing for anyone listening to this. Um, you are genuinely fantastic to talk to, and I am so looking forward to getting the digital app out there, getting the links to your book, the links to your website, and a slide on how executives can contact you to engage you in their organizations, because I think it's an important piece to be. Um, anyway, any final thoughts before you leave us today and leave the blockchain? And we call it the blockchain because it's just, we want to create an infinite group and this huge group of knowledge, right? It has nothing. I get all these crazy emails about, hey, are you building a blockchain? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm building a knowledge blockchain. So
No, I
anyway,
love it.
any other thoughts from you, or anything you want to leave us with before we finish up?
No, thank you. You've been such a generous host. Thank you, and so complimentary. I really appreciate it. I think, and thank you for your vulnerability. I've done over 100 podcasts over the last year and a half or so,
Oh,
and it's been a fun journey. It's been fun meeting a lot of podcasters. The podcasts that always go the best are when the podcaster, him or herself, is willing to get vulnerable.
mhm.
The feeling changes. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for setting that example for your listeners, and even for me. And it's a great reminder that meaning comes by tearing down our internal walls, and hopefully this is an invitation for all of us, or a reminder for all of us to do that.
Absolutely. And thank you again. I appreciate it. So with that, maybe we'll see each other soon, I hope. And I hope we have another a good encounter down the road. I always love second time guests to see how they've evolved, maybe 6 to 10, 12 months later, and see what's happened.
Great.
And best of luck with everything else. And listen, I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Leo.